Okay, now the psychotrauma itself.
Mhm.
The psychotrauma is the immediate emotional response following the traumatic event. So you have the event and then you have the response. This is called psychotrauma in itself. It is intense, uncontrolled, extreme, or moderate helplessness. It's the first sudden reaction. And to understand it, I summarize in few words, it is too much of sensorial or emotional excitation or stimulation. And these are technical terms because when we have our how can I call that? We we see, we hear the senses. We have five senses. So these senses, they receive stimulation and excitation. So the connotation of this word is very narrow. It's just about our senses. So too much of sensorial, emotional excitation, stimulation, and too suddenly for the assimilation, absorption, individual's capacity. So it's too much at the same time. It can be negative, and you know what? It can also be positive. You have a good news, and it's too much. It's something that you did not expect, let's say, to receive, and you many emotions because it's you cannot assimilate that. You understand? So we go to page 3. So this is a normal reaction, and we can compare that to an overflow, a backwash or an overflow. And then we have to make differences between 2, 3 different psychotrauma. You can have a simple psychotrauma. It is caused by a simple traumatic event, but you may have complex psychotraumas. They are caused by repeating traumatic events. For example, imprisonment, hostage holdings, and it's like one event that repeats itself and repeats itself. So this becomes complex psychotrauma, and you may have even more complex psychotrauma, and these are situations of abuse and aggression within the family or in the neighborhood. So some kids, children will go through these kinds of traumatic events all during their childhood. So these are very, very complex psychotraumas. Now we have another distinction. The psychotrauma, which is the reaction, it may be direct. So the victim can be the subject who underwent the traumatic event. So the victim, the person who has the psychotrauma is the direct victim. And the victim can be, unfortunately, be the author of the traumatic event. If you drive a car and you have a car accident and you kill somebody, you are a victim of yourself, but you are in a trauma. Worse than that. And now I will refer to the war in Ukraine. worse than that. You may have soldiers and their general, they force them to kill people. They did not want to kill people. They had the obligation to do that. And when the war is finished, they are traumatized by guilt because they did that. So, it's never just one phase of these situations. It's always very complex. So we have to understand, to help people, we have to understand that we may be a victim directly or indirectly, but we are the victim. But the psychotrauma can also be indirect. In in this case, and this affects in Ukraine the professionals who work with people. They have to absorb all the traumatic emotions of the people so they may become a victim themselves of indirect traumatic situations. So the professional to have means to treat themselves at the same time they deliver services. Sometimes we forget to do that. But if we don't have ways to take care of ourselves as a professional, then we are in danger. So I would say that the work we are doing together, myself, I am outside Ukraine, outside this I would say sordid war. I am affected very indirectly by this. So I am in a good position to help all the people who work with survivors and victims. You see, it's a kind of I would say indirect implication. So my emotions are not affected. If I was myself a victim of the war and that I have been one, I don't know if I would be able to cure other people because I would have to cure myself first. So me in this work I'm doing with you, I am the one who is not affected, so I am available emotionally to work with the people. You see? Okay, so we go to let me see. Oh yes, on page 4. sometimes sometimes some people will not react to a traumatic event. They will not react at all. And sometimes they will have the feeling to have survived to something, and this is like a miracle, and this is magic, and they will feel empowered with that. But there is a danger. It's like they have been wounded, but they don't know it, they don't feel it. The problem is that when this great feeling will go down in the days, in the weeks and months that will follow, they will feel all the overflow they were able to dissociate with. So this is something that we have to take care of in what I call lack of reaction following a traumatic event. We have to be always very prudent with people who don't react. People who will tell you, it's okay with me, I can cope with this, I can adapt, I am strong. And the answer must be, yes, you are strong now, but you may check, you may check. Um, Sometimes some people will go to see the doctor, and the doctor will diagnose something, and they will say, for me, it's not a problem. I get used to have that, and it's okay. And the doctor will say, if this is not treated, you are in danger. You are in danger. So sometimes we're not aware, and we have to. So your professionals who work with people who says everything's fine with me, we have to be prudent all the time. I'm not saying, and I'm not saying that people don't have um, coping mechanism. This exists. Some people are very good in coping mechanism, but sometimes it's just in appearance, and it's not deep installed, this coping mechanism. Professional this must be aware of that possibility. And another thing too is the memory we have of a traumatic event. We have to understand that memory change the event all the time, all the time, all the time. If you do a very simple exercise, you describe to a friend an evening you participate to with other friends. You say that the day after, 2 days after, 3 days after, and you will see your story will change. It will change with time. And then 1 week after, 2 weeks after, it will be a different story. So for traumas, when there is a lot of emotion, the change is more than major, because we have to adapt, and we try unconsciously to put aside, and we don't know that we do that mechanically. We put aside which is difficult, and we keep which is easier to remember. So we change the story. It's like you're reading a novel, and then you take scissors and you cut some pages you don't like. So our memory works like that. Okay, now we present the traumatic event. Second, we present the post trauma, the post the excuse me, the psychotrauma. And now we will enter in the post traumatic stress disorder. So would you have any question now
Um, well,
on this
with you,
these two parts?
it's the way you describe it, I automatically put it into our perspective in terms of the war, because the war had started in 2014, not for everyone. So I
Yes,
was indirectly hurt in 2014.
yes,
Now I'm still like, I'm reliving that indirect trauma, but on a much bigger scale, whereas people who were directly traumatized in 2014,
yes,
now they sort of indirectly traumatized, so it's a very delicate yet self-beneficial, if I may,
yeah,
because Julie, remember the writer, the one who wrote the poems,
yeah.
her direct trauma and her direct losses in a family took place in 2014. And
Mhm.
she is, for me now, she is my strength, if I may,
Yes,
because I am now living in still indirect trauma, but it's much more feasible now, much more visible, because we already have some losses within our family, but not human losses, not the beating hearts, you know, it's just financial and whatever material. But within her experience and when it happened with her, she somehow managed on herself, on her own, maybe due to her willpower, but she managed to accumulate enough of resources from 2014 and now we're in 2022, where me and people like myself, we sort of now only experiencing more and more and more trauma that we can see, that we can visually pursue, you know, perceive, sorry. So this is very interesting because Ukrainian war, every war is unique, but Ukrainian war in terms of time frame, geography, cultural, say, complications, as in any culture, as in any big country, like we are massive countries, so every big country with a lot of population would inevitably have, you know, questions and identity crises and just even regardless to the fact that we are only 30 years of age, 31 as a country. So thank you. It's put everything you just saying, putting our situation, our case with the Ukrainian war in much detailed and in much more approachable way.
Okay, good. Okay. So we will go to the post-traumatic stress disorder.
Oui.